I stared at my glowing phone screen in the middle of a $2 million wedding reception. The message was from the groom, my best friend of 28 years, sent from his limo on the way to the airport. I only married her because I wanted you to get jealous. Stop me. He wanted me to play the desperate, obsessed woman. Instead, I decided to burn his entire life to the ground. Hello to all the wonderful listeners of Maya Revenge Stories, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for your continuous support. Unfortunately, YouTube has recently demonetized our channel, leaving us without the necessary budget to keep operating. If you find today's story captivating, please support us by joining the Maya Revenge Stories Patreon, where you can listen to even more incredible, exclusive true stories that are much longer, packed with detailed situations we cannot publicize on YouTube, and performed by multiple emotional voice actors in a single story. You can easily join by scanning the QR code currently on your screen, or by clicking the Patreon link in the description or the pinned comment of this video. Now, let us dive right into today's story, as we follow the deeply unsettling journey of Chloe Scott. There is a specific kind of suffocating coldness to the new wealth in Seattle. It is a world built on virtual realities, cloud architecture, and startup valuations, where everything shines but nothing feels entirely solid. I knew this world intimately. At 32 years old, I had bled for my career to become the Director of Strategic Development at Aeronova Dynamics, a high-stakes virtual technology firm. But no matter how clinical my professional life was, I always had one unwavering anchor of genuine warmth in my personal life. His name was Julian. Julian and I had been inseparable for 28 years. We had shared playpens as toddlers in diapers, scraped knees in middle school, and the agonizing anxiety of college acceptance letters. He was not just a friend. In the architecture of my life, he was a load-bearing pillar. I loved him with the fierce, protective, and completely asexual devotion you reserve for a biological brother. That innocent illusion shattered completely on the night of his $2 million wedding. The reception was a masterclass in the fabricated glamour of the tech elite. Thousands of imported white orchids hung from the glass ceiling of the grand ballroom, creating an atmosphere that felt less like a celebration of love and more like an aggressive corporate merger. The architect of this flawless display was his new wife, Harper. Harper was a high-level public relations executive, and she looked exactly like someone who engineered public perception for a living. She was terrifyingly perfect. Every smile she offered the cameras was calculated down to the millimeter. Every laugh sounded like a carefully tuned bell. I had tried to embrace her, telling myself that Julian deserved a woman who commanded a room, but standing near her always left me with a quiet, creeping sense of dread. As the night wore on, the open bars flowed with thousands of dollars worth of champagne, and the dance floor filled with tech investors in custom tuxedos. I stood alone near a massive ice sculpture, nursing a drink, feeling the hollow ache of losing my childhood best friend to a new life. Then, my phone vibrated against my palm. It was a text from Julian. He was supposed to be in the back of a luxury limousine, halfway to the airport to catch a private flight for their extravagant honeymoon. I opened the message, expecting a sweet, drunken farewell. Instead, the words on the screen made the blood drain entirely from my face. I only married her because I wanted you to get jealous. Stop me. I read it twice, then a third time. My stomach violently churned. A wave of absolute disgust washed over me, raw and suffocating. It felt as though a stranger had worn my brother's skin for nearly 3 decades and suddenly unzipped it to reveal something monstrous. The boundary of our 28-year friendship, a boundary I believed was sacred and unbreakable, had just been violated by an emotionally incestuous confession. I did not reply. I locked my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the device. I slipped out the back doors of the ballroom, ignoring the valet, and walked 3 miles back to my hotel in the freezing rain. I locked the heavy wooden door of my room, threw the deadbolt, and collapsed onto the floor. I wept not for a lost lover, but for the agonizing death of a lifelong friendship. The silence of my hotel room over the next few days offered no sanctuary. Julian did not stop at one message. He began to bombard me with a relentless stream of texts, shifting wildly in tone. At first, there were desperate pleas. "Answer me, Chloe. Tell me to turn the plane around." When I maintained my stony silence, the messages turned venomous. "You cannot act like you did not know. You led me on for 28 years. You always looked at me like I was yours. You made me do this." I sat in the dark for 48 hours, staring at the glowing screen as he twisted our shared history into a grotesque weapon. Every memory we had, every time I had leaned on his shoulder when a relationship failed, every late-night pizza we shared during finals week. He was now weaponizing it, claiming it was evidence of my unspoken romantic manipulation. I was paralyzed by a sickening mixture of heartbreak and guilt. I genuinely began to wonder if I had unknowingly destroyed my own life. I did not know it yet, but this agonizing torment was only the opening move of a much darker, much more terrifying game. 14 days later, the newlyweds returned. I had braced myself for a storm. I expected avoiding glances, a tearful apology, or a heavy, unbearable silence. I received nothing of the sort. Julian walked right into the gleaming glass lobby of Aeronova Dynamics on a Tuesday morning. He wore a crisp linen shirt and a deep, sun-kissed tan. He smiled. It was a wide, bright, terrifyingly easy smile. He strode across the floor and threw his arms around me. He smelled of expensive coconut oil and sea salt. He asked me about my current project timelines. He laughed loudly at a passing joke from a coworker. There was no hesitation in his voice. There was no lingering guilt. There was no secret, obsessive longing hidden in his eyes. He played the role of the perfect, radiant husband effortlessly. It was as if the night of the wedding had been erased from existence. His normalcy made my blood run entirely cold. Then came Harper. She was infinitely worse. She suddenly decided we were the absolute best of friends. She began to invade my territory with calculated precision. She started showing up at the security desk of my office unannounced. She brought artisanal almond milk lattes and expensive pastries. She would sit on the edge of my desk, crossing her perfectly toned legs, and chat loudly about their honeymoon resort. She invited me to their newly renovated house for dinner. Not just once. She invited me 3 times in 7 days. It was an aggressive, suffocating brand of hospitality. Her floral perfume lingered in my office long after she left, a constant, sickening reminder of her presence. I had to end the charade. I could not breathe under the weight of their act. I attended their Friday night dinner, determined to force the truth into the open. The opportunity arose when Harper went into the kitchen to pull a tray of roasted vegetables from the oven. I was left completely alone with Julian in the dimly lit dining room. I leaned across the heavy mahogany table. I lowered my voice to a sharp whisper. I asked him directly why he sent those messages. I demanded to know why he tried to destroy my sanity on his wedding night. He stopped wiping down a crystal wine glass. He slowly looked up. His eyes met mine. I searched his face for a flicker of panic, a twitch of guilt, or a breaking of character. There was nothing. There was only pure, unadulterated confusion. His performance was chillingly flawless. "What are you talking about, Chloe?" he asked. His voice was soft. It carried a gently patronizing tone. "Did you have a bad dream? You are working way too hard on this new merger. You look completely exhausted." A hot flash of rage flared in my chest. I reached into my leather purse. I pulled out my phone. I unlocked the screen with trembling fingers. I tapped aggressively on our message thread. I was fully prepared to shove the digital proof directly into his lying face and shatter his calm facade. I scrolled up to the date of the wedding reception. Nothing. The screen was completely blank. Every frantic plea, every venomous accusation, every late-night text he sent from the back of that limousine was gone. The chat log jumped seamlessly from a harmless internet joke I sent him 2 days before the wedding, straight to a generic, mundane text he sent me yesterday morning about the Seattle weather. My breath caught sharply in my throat. I stared at the glowing screen. I refreshed the application. I restarted the entire phone. Nothing changed. the messages were wiped completely clean. I stared at him in horror. He worked in advanced server architecture. He understood data manipulation better than anyone I knew. He had used an enterprise-grade, encrypted self-destruct protocol. He had remotely purged the data from my device using a zero-day exploit, leaving zero digital footprint. It was a phantom wipe. Only a high-level insider in the tech sector could execute a purge so cleanly and quietly. He watched me panic. His face remained a flawless mask of innocent concern. Harper walked back into the dining room holding a silver serving tray. Julian looked up at his wife and sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "Honey, I think Chloe needs to go home," he said softly, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. "She is talking about some imaginary text messages. I think the stress at the firm is finally getting to her." Harper stopped. She looked down at me. Her eyes were wide with a deeply unsettling, mocking pity. "Oh, sweetie," she cooed. "Are you having an episode?" I grabbed my coat and left the house without speaking another word. The night air did nothing to calm my racing heart. The poison of their narrative spread quickly. Within 48 hours, the whispers began to circulate through our shared social circles. Mutual friends stopped calling. When I ran into them at a local coffee shop, they offered tight, uncomfortable smiles and quickly looked away. A senior colleague in my division pulled me aside near the elevator. He told me people were talking behind my back. They were saying I had suffered a mental breakdown. They were whispering that I was bitterly, hopelessly jealous of Harper. The story they spun painted me as a delusional, obsessed woman who could not accept that her lifelong friend had happily moved on. The isolation was absolute. The gaslighting was working perfectly. I spent hours sitting on the cold tiles of my bathroom floor, shivering. The heavy silence of my empty apartment pressed down on me like a physical weight. I held my wiped phone in my hands until my knuckles turned stark white. I stared at my own reflection in the bathroom mirror. My face looked drawn, pale, and terrified. I genuinely began to question my own mind. Did I invent the messages in a moment of subconscious jealousy? Did my overworked brain project my own hidden insecurities onto a blank digital screen? Was I actually losing my grip on reality? The trap had snapped shut around me, and I was entirely alone in the dark, doubting my own sanity. The fog of my supposed insanity finally broke not in a therapist's office, but in a fluorescent-lit conference room on the 42nd floor of Aeronova Dynamics. We were in the final stages of a massive corporate merger. For 5 grueling years, I had poured every ounce of my intellect and energy into developing a proprietary algorithm for virtual neural sensory mapping. It was the crown jewel of our portfolio, estimated to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. During a routine due diligence audit, I found a deeply buried anomaly. A completely unknown shell company, registered in Delaware, was aggressively petitioning the patent office with a mirrored version of my exact algorithm. The architecture was identical. The coding structures were my own unique signatures. Someone had stolen my life's work. In the cutthroat, hyper-competitive ecosystem of American startups, intellectual property theft is a blood sport. You do not survive by crying. You survive by striking back. I stopped questioning my sanity and started questioning my security protocols. I quietly withdrew $15,000 in cash from my savings account and hired a private investigator who specialized in corporate espionage. We met late on a Thursday night in a rundown diner on the edge of the city. He slid a thick manila folder across the sticky Formica table. "Your shell company is a ghost," he said, tapping the folder. "But ghosts still have to pay filing fees." I followed a convoluted trail of offshore wire transfers and cryptocurrency conversions. It all leads back to a single hidden holding account. I opened the folder. The name on the holding account hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Julian. My childhood best friend was not just a cruel manipulator. He was an intellectual property thief. He was trying to steal the patent that would guarantee my entire financial future. But a terrifying question remained. Why did he orchestrate that elaborate psychological torture on his wedding night? What did the gaslighting have to do with corporate theft? I needed hard, undeniable evidence, I knew Julian's habits better than anyone. He was a digital hoarder. He never threw away old hardware. I knew his childhood bedroom at his parents' house in the suburbs was filled with his old servers and laptops. I also knew his parents were currently on a 3-week cruise in the Mediterranean. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, I drove out to his parents' house. I walked to the side of the garage, lifted the fake rock near the rose bushes, and retrieved the spare key that had been there for 20 years. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my hands were completely steady. I unlocked the heavy oak door and slipped inside. The house smelled exactly as I remembered, a mix of old cedar and vanilla potpourri. It felt like trespassing in a graveyard of my own memories. I crept upstairs to his old room. It was untouched, a shrine to his teenage years. Pushed beneath his bed was a heavy, reinforced lockbox. I remembered the combination from when we were teenagers. It was my birthday. I spun the dial, pulled the metal latch, and found his old primary development laptop. I did not dare turn it on normally. I plugged in a secure USB drive, loaded with a deep recovery operating system, and booted the machine directly from my drive. I bypassed his administrator passwords entirely and began scraping the deepest, hidden partitions of his hard drive for recently deleted files. It took 2 agonizing hours of watching lines of code scroll across the dark screen. Finally, the software flagged a heavily encrypted hidden folder. I cracked the encryption key using a brute force decryption tool I had engineered back in college. Inside the folder was a single audio file, recorded just 4 days before his wedding. I plugged in my earphones and pressed play. It was a recorded phone call. Julian's voice came through crisp and clear, devoid of any warmth. He was laying out a meticulous strategy to an unknown party on the other end of the line. "The code extraction is almost complete," Julian said. "But we have a liability. Chloe is smart. When we file the patent and take it to market, she will immediately know I stole it from Aranova. She will launch a massive legal injunction to freeze our assets." The other voice murmured something unintelligible. "That is why we neutralize her credibility first," Julian replied, his tone chillingly casual. "I am going to send her a series of unhinged, romantic text messages on the night of the wedding. I will make it look like she has been obsessively in love with me for years. Then, I will wipe the texts from her phone using a 0-day exploit. When she tries to talk about it, we act like she is crazy. We plant the seed with our mutual friends that she is having a psychotic break due to jealousy." I stopped breathing. The walls of the room seemed to spin. "Think about it," Julian continued on the recording, laughing softly. "When she eventually tries to sue us for the patent theft, we will just present her as a delusional, rejected stalker. The board of directors and the judges will take one look at her history of erratic behavior, her imaginary text messages, and her supposed obsession with my marriage. They will throw her corporate espionage claims right out the window. It is the perfect legal shield." The audio file ended. I sat in the dead silence of his childhood bedroom. The truth was far more horrifying than a ruined friendship. Julian never loved me. He never even desired me. The wedding night texts were not a drunken confession or a twisted game of ego. They were a carefully engineered trap. He had weaponized my entire emotional reality to build a preemptive legal defense for his financial crimes. He was preparing to slaughter my career, and he had set me up to look like a hysterical, obsessed woman so no one would ever believe my screams. The suffocating blanket of paranoia and self-doubt instantly evaporated. I was not crazy. I was the target of a brilliant, ruthless corporate assassination. I carefully shut down the laptop, packed up my tools, and walked out of the house. The fear was completely gone, replaced by a cold, razor-sharp clarity. I was no longer a victim trapped in a psychological cage. I was a strategist, and it was time to go to war. I did not sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen island with the decrypted audio file loaded into a professional sound engineering software suite. I needed to know exactly who Julian was speaking to on that recording. I isolated the vocal frequencies, stripped away the background static, and amplified the secondary audio track. The muffled voice on the other end of the line finally sharpened into terrifying clarity. It was not a corporate lawyer. It was not a rival tech executive. It was Harper. Make sure she sounds completely unstable. Julian, her crisp, melodic voice instructed through the speakers. If she files a legal injunction when we take the algorithm to market, I need her looking like a jealous psychopath. The investors will not touch a lawsuit filed by a rejected stalker. The perfect supportive wife was not an innocent bystander or a victim of Julian's manipulation. She was the architect. She was the mastermind pulling the strings from the shadows. The next morning, I instructed my private investigator to pivot his entire focus away from the shell company and directly onto Harper. I paid him another $10,000 to dig into her financial history. 72 hours later, he handed me a dossier that completely shattered the illusion of her flawless high society pedigree. Harper was financially radioactive. Behind her designer dresses and her lucrative public relations firm, she was hiding a catastrophic financial secret. During the market boom 2 years ago, she had heavily leveraged her assets into volatile cryptocurrency derivatives. When the market crashed, it wiped her out entirely, but she did not just lose her own money. She had borrowed heavily from unregulated, high-interest private lenders to cover her margin calls. Harper was currently suffocating under $3,500,000 of debt. These were not forgiving bank loans. These were shadow financiers who did not send collection letters. They sent enforcers. The marriage suddenly made perfect, sickening sense. It was a calculated business transaction forged in desperation and greed. Julian wanted to elevate himself into the elite tech billionaire circles, and Harper needed a massive, immediate injection of cash to save her own life. My proprietary algorithm was their golden ticket. They were going to steal my life's work, sell it to the highest bidder, pay off the underground lenders, and use the rest to cement their status in Seattle's upper crust. The realization hit me with the force of a freight train, knocking the breath from my lungs. For 28 years, I had completely misunderstood the fundamental nature of our relationship. My mind rapidly cataloged our entire shared history, viewing every memory through this newly discovered, horrifying lens. He never comforted me out of genuine empathy. He kept me close because I was a high-yield asset. I was the one who wrote his college application essays because his grades were slipping. I was the one who introduced him to his first venture capitalist when his early career stalled. I was never his soulmate or his platonic best friend. I was a parasite's perfect host. I was a personal goldmine, carefully cultivated and kept in reserve until the day he needed to completely drain me. I walked slowly into my bathroom and turned on the harsh overhead lights. I stood in front of the wide mirror and stared at my reflection. My eyes were red-rimmed, my face gaunt from weeks of agonizing stress and self-doubt. I looked at the long, dark hair flowing past my shoulders. Julian had always loved my hair. He used to playfully tug on it when we were teenagers, constantly telling me never to cut it because it made me look soft and approachable. I opened the vanity drawer and pulled out a heavy pair of steel fabric scissors. I did not cry. The well of my grief had run completely dry, replaced by a vast, freezing tundra of pure rage. I grabbed a thick fistful of my hair at the base of my neck and squeezed the cold steel blades together. The loud, sharp snipping sound echoed sharply against the bathroom tiles. I hacked away blindly until the long strands fell to the floor like dead weight. I leveled the edges until I was left with a jagged, severe cut that barely brushed my jawline. The naive, devoted sister he knew was dead, buried under the severed hair on the floor. I wiped my face with a cold, damp towel. The woman staring back at me in the mirror was completely unrecognizable. She was a hunter. I formulated a plan of total annihilation, mapping out their destruction down to the absolute millimeter. The most dangerous predators do not roar to announce their presence. They play dead. If I confronted them now, they would panic and hide their tracks. Instead, I decided to give them exactly what they wanted. I would embrace the role of the broken, hysterical, jealous woman they had engineered. I would let them believe their psychological torture had completely shattered my mind, lulling them into a deep, fatal sense of invincibility. I was going to hand them the rope, and I was going to smile while they tied it around their own necks. The first move in my engineered destruction required bait. Julian needed access to my final algorithm, but he could not know I was handing it to him. I spent 3 sleepless nights rewriting the core architecture of the software. I buried a highly advanced logic bomb deep within the source code. It was a digital Trojan horse, designed to lay dormant until a specific execution command was triggered. On the surface, the code looked like a pristine, flawless masterpiece worth tens of millions of dollars. Underneath, it was a synchronized detonator waiting for a spark. To make the theft look completely natural, I began playing the part of a woman rapidly unraveling at the seams. I leveraged the office politics of Aeronova Dynamics, allowing the rumors of my instability to flourish. I showed up to the corporate headquarters wearing wrinkled, mismatched clothes. I intentionally left my secure identification badge at home twice in 1 week. I even cried openly in the employee break room, ensuring the senior partners saw my supposedly fragile mental state. Finally, on a quiet Friday afternoon, I intentionally left my secure workstation completely unlocked and went to the cafeteria for 45 minutes. Julian, who worked 3 floors down, had been monitoring my network activity for weeks. By the time I returned, the hidden server logs showed a massive, encrypted data packet had been transferred to an external Internet Protocol address. The thief had swallowed the hook perfectly. But I could not execute the final blow alone. Corporate treason of this magnitude required executive authority, especially when it involved proprietary assets. I bypassed my direct managers and requested a highly confidential, off-the-books meeting with the chief executive officer of Aeronova Dynamics. Her name was Evelyn Vance, a self-made billionaire who had clawed her way to the top of the tech industry by ruthlessly crushing anyone who crossed her. She was a woman who despised disloyalty and corporate espionage above all else. I sat across from her massive glass desk and slid a thick black leather folder toward her. It contained the irrefutable server logs, the encrypted chat transcripts I had recovered, and the complete financial trail connecting Julian directly to the shell company attempting to steal our patent. I did not shed a single tear. I spoke with absolute, awed precision. I explained the theft, the shell company, and exactly how we were going to let him publicly hang himself. Evelyn examined the documents in complete silence for 15 minutes. When she finally looked up, her eyes were as hard and unforgiving as flint. "He is preparing to launch a stolen product using our infrastructure," Evelyn said, her voice a deadly, controlled whisper. "He actually thinks we are completely blind." "He thinks I am too broken to notice," I corrected her, leaning forward slightly. "I want him to launch it. I want him to stand on a stage and put his fraudulent name on it. Then, I want to burn him alive in front of the entire industry. I just need your executive authorization to let the trap snap shut." Evelyn leaned back in her heavy leather chair. A slow, dangerous smile crept across her face. "You have my full authorization. Chloe, do not leave a single piece of him intact." With the chief executive officer securing our legal flank, I watched Julian and Harper accelerate blindly toward their own doom. The trap was working flawlessly. Blinded by their overwhelming greed and absolute arrogance, they took the stolen, booby-trapped code and rushed it to market, to fund their massive launch. Harper went back to her shadow financiers in the criminal underworld. She leveraged the equity in their new house, their luxury cars, and the projected valuation of the stolen algorithm to borrow another $4 million. They poured every single cent into securing a premium keynote presentation slot at the National Technology Summit, the largest and most prestigious innovation showcase in the country. They were pushing all their chips into the center of the table. To ensure they felt completely invincible, I filed for a 6-week psychiatric leave of absence from the company. I told the Human Resources Department I was suffering from a severe depressive episode and needed immediate intervention. Then, I sent Julian and Harper a long, pathetic text message. I apologized for my erratic behavior. I told them I was going to a private wellness retreat in the mountains to heal my broken heart and clear my mind. I wished them endless happiness and boundless success in their new marriage. Julian replied an hour later with a patronizing heart emoji. telling me to get well soon. He thought I was neutralized. He thought he had successfully gaslit me into total, pathetic submission. The board was now perfectly set. Every single piece of their lives, their stolen capital, their fabricated social standing, and their actual physical safety from the criminal underworld, rested entirely on a successful product launch at the summit. They were walking out onto the brightest stage in the nation, completely unaware that the floor beneath them was rigged with high explosives. I packed a sharp, tailored black suit, poured myself a glass of expensive cold water, and waited for the morning of the summit. The main auditorium of the National Technology Summit was a cavernous amphitheater of glass and steel, packed to the absolute brim with over 5,000 venture capitalists, industry journalists, and high-level angel investors. The atmosphere crackled with the electric hum of anticipated wealth. The stage was bathed in dramatic, icy blue spotlights. From my vantage point in the darkened VIP balcony, 50 feet above the main floor, I had the perfect view of the slaughterhouse. I wore a perfectly tailored black suit, holding a crystal glass of expensive red wine, waiting for the curtain to rise. Julian and Harper walked onto the brightly lit stage to a wave of enthusiastic applause. They looked like the absolute pinnacle of Seattle tech royalty. Harper wore a stunning designer dress that screamed quiet luxury, projecting the image of a fiercely supportive partner. Julian stood at the center podium, commanding the room with the practiced arrogance of a man who believed he was untouchable. Behind them stretched a massive 40-foot high-definition digital screen, waiting to display the algorithm they had stolen from my life to secure their fraudulent empire. Julian grasped the microphone. His voice echoed through the massive hall, smooth and completely devoid of any guilt. He spoke passionately about innovation, about the years of hard work he claimed he had poured into this project, and about revolutionizing the virtual neural sensory space. Every word out of his mouth was a meticulously crafted lie, polished by Harper's public relations expertise. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian announced, gesturing grandly toward the massive screen behind him, "I present to you the future of virtual architecture. Let us initiate the live simulation." He pressed the execution key on his laptop. Down in the core architecture of the software, my dormant logic bomb woke up. It recognized the specific hardware signature of the summit's mainframe, bypassed all localized firewalls, and executed the payload exactly as I had programmed it. The 40-foot screen did not display a glowing three-dimensional neural map. Instead, the screen violently glitched, flashing a blinding warning sign red. A loud digital screech tore through the auditorium speakers, silencing the murmuring crowd instantly. Then, the data began to pour onto the screen. First came the banking statements. Massive, high-resolution images of Harper and Julian's joint accounts filled the 40-foot display. The crowd gasped as the screen highlighted a catastrophic negative balance of $3,500,000, tied directly to notorious shadow lenders in the criminal underworld. The pristine image of the wealthy tech couple evaporated in 3 seconds. Julian frantically mashed the keys on his laptop, his golden tan draining into a sickly, chalky white. "There is a technical error," he stammered into the microphone, his voice cracking wildly. "Somebody cut the feed, cut the power." But the presentation was locked. I had hard-coded the broadcast protocol. The screen shifted again. This time, it displayed the highly encrypted, self-destructing text messages Julian had sent me from his limousine on the night of his $2 million wedding. The exact messages he had wiped from my phone were now magnified 20 feet high for 5,000 people to read. Accompanying the texts was the chilling audio recording I had recovered from his old laptop. Julian's own voice boomed through the massive stadium speakers, loudly bragging to Harper about how they were going to steal my patent and gaslight me into a mental breakdown so no one would believe my legal claims. The silence in the auditorium was completely deafening. The investors were frozen in absolute shock. The journalists were frantically typing on their phones, realizing they were witnessing the greatest corporate suicide in modern history. But I was not finished. I wanted to burn them all the way down to the foundation. The screen flashed one final time for the ultimate, fatal twist: a series of private hotel receipts, intimate photographs, and explicit text messages plastered themselves across the giant display. They were not between Julian and me. They were between Julian and Sarah, Harper's beautiful, wealthy maid of honor. The financial logs displayed next to the photos showed Julian actively siphoning hundreds of thousands of dollars from Sarah's trust fund into a hidden offshore account, promising to leave his new wife for her once the tech summit was over. He had not just betrayed his childhood best friend, he had ruthlessly betrayed his own co-conspirator. Harper turned slowly on the stage, the calculated, flawless public relations mask completely shattered, revealing the desperate, horrified face underneath. She looked at the screen, then at the man she had conspired with to save her own life. She let out a primal, echoing scream of pure rage and lunged at him. The sharp, violent smack of her hand connecting with Julian's face rang out through the microphone, echoing across the silent auditorium. Julian stumbled backward, completely losing his balance and crashing into the podium. He was a broken, terrified shell of a man, his mind completely collapsing under the weight of his own exposed treachery. The massive double doors at the back of the auditorium suddenly swung open. A team of federal economic police and corporate fraud investigators marched down the center aisle, their badges flashing under the house lights. Evelyn Vance, the billionaire chief executive officer of Aeronova Dynamics, had timed her call to the authorities perfectly. They stepped onto the stage, presenting immediate arrest warrants for grand corporate larceny, wire fraud, and severe intellectual property theft. Julian was hauled to his feet, his hands forcefully secured behind his back in heavy steel cuffs. Harper was sobbing hysterically on the floor of the stage, her designer dress ruined, fully realizing that without the stolen patent money, the underground shadow financiers would be waiting for her the second she posted bail. I stepped forward to the very edge of the VIP balcony. The lighting caught my sharp, newly cut hair and the tailored edges of my suit. Julian, panicked and hyperventilating as he was dragged toward the exit, looked up and finally saw me. He stopped struggling. The sheer terror in his eyes confirmed he finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. I was not the broken, obsessed victim he had engineered. I was his executioner. I looked down at him, my face completely devoid of mercy. I raised my crystal glass of red wine in a slow, deliberate toast toward the stage. "You wanted me to stop you, right, best friend?" I said, my voice carrying clearly over the chaos. "I just did." The aftermath was clinical and absolute. Julian and Harper were denied bail due to the severe flight risk and the massive scope of their financial crimes. They are currently sitting in federal holding, facing decades in prison, while their shadow creditors dismantle whatever assets they have left. As for me, Evelyn Vance, true to her word, promoted me to the Vice President of Strategic Innovation at Aeronova Dynamics. Today, I sit in a massive corner office on the 42nd floor. I sip expensive, vintage champagne, looking out over the sprawling Seattle skyline. I built a brilliant, untouchable new life from the ashes of my past. And for the first time in 28 years, I am breathing clean air, completely free of the parasite that tried to consume me. Thank you so much to all of our incredible listeners for joining us on this intense journey today. I would love to know, where are you tuning in from? Please let me know in the comments below. If you found today's story captivating and want to support our team, please consider joining the Maya Revenge Stories Patreon. There, you can listen to our most exclusive, thrilling true stories that are far too detailed and intense to publish publicly on YouTube. You can easily join by scanning the QR code currently on your screen, or by clicking the Patreon link in the description or the pinned comment of this video. Thank you again, and stay strong out there.